listening to The American Dream with Jay McNally on Wham Talk 1600.
Welcome back. We have Darrin Moore on the line with us. We're going to be talking about the movie Atlas Shrugged, which opened last night. I enjoyed the film. It was interesting. I have to admit I never read the book, mainly because I never agreed with Ayn Rand's self-acknowledged, very selfish philosophy. Nevertheless, the book Atlas Shrugged and The Fountain have been huge influences in our culture. Many, many people have read the book and said it changed their lives. I think you can summarize her outlook as saying you have the providers and then you have the takers. And she doesn't much like the takers. So, Darrin, welcome back.
Well, thanks, Jay. Yeah, she pretty much wants any regular person to take a flying leap, doesn't she?
It certainly seems that way, yeah. Especially if you're not, what should we say, an A-type personality who's working hard and making a lot of money. You're just a looter or a mooch. You're the bad people.
That's right. I mean, there's some wonderful critiques out there, and you know, there's very few things that I like talking about more than Ayn Rand and Atlas Shrugged and what she got right, but also what she got wrong. You know, the problem with the book is that a lot of people read it when they're young, anarchistic and materialistic, and they think, yeah, this makes more sense than anything I have ever read. And they get caught up in believing that Ayn has given them some absolute truth, the only truth, and they stop growing from there. As Roger Scruton might say, they grow into immaturity. Or, you know, Russell Kirk talks about how the young person, cut off from the faith and tradition of their forebears, look to throw their latent enthusiasm in with anyone who offers a new version of salvation here on earth or some new ideology. And so a lot of folks that become objectivists, the philosophy that Ayn promotes, you know, they just never grow from there, and then they become hermetically sealed, where they cannot even begin to consider the critiques against her form of materialism, which is essentially, I mean, that's her philosophy in a nutshell, is the philosophy of capitalism, which of course we know is really a materialistic ideology that is really just the flip side to Marxism, another materialist ideology.
Early on in college, I got to know some people who had very close friends in New York, and they knew her personally. Her personal life was a complete disaster. She was married several times. She had these, what would you call them, polygamous relationships with several people at the same time. And she was known personally to just about anybody who dealt with her as a very mean, vicious personality. And all of that comes out in some of the essays about her. That motivated me not to read her. At least in the film, I think it really brought out that we are in a real difficult situation where, the takers, those who need, let's say that's probably a small segment of those who are, I don't want to say on the dole or on the taking end of it, but those who want, that's a much greater proportion, are outnumbering those who can produce. As Aristotle said, democracies normally don't last more than 200 years because eventually the takers overtake the givers, and then you wind up with chaos and then tyranny. So that's what I always thought with Ayn Rand, that her idea was that not only should you have the productive class, but that productive class should basically be unconcerned with the others. I thought it was very selfish.
Well, she wrote a book. I mean, The Virtue of Selfishness, and indeed, when you read what Russell Kirk has written about her, I mean, he goes on to say it's a doctrine of universal selfishness, and you know the oath from the, I don't want to spoil the second sequel, but I mean, the oath is that I swear by my life and my love of it that I will not live for the sake of any other man, nor ask any other man to live for the sake of me. And so, like Whittaker Chambers might say, that she really only teaches people how to be an economic man, a half a man, a hollow man, T.S. Eliot might have called them. When anybody who's lived for the sake of others realizes that is the true reward. Now, that doesn't mean that we should be, you know, this collectivist state, and she does an awesome job of showing how the trappings of a collectivist state, the looters trying to think that they should use government to redistribute wealth, how that really ends up hurting the masses more than it allows for what Wilhelm Röpke might call a humane economy, where on a human scale, man takes care of his family and grows his wealth through an enlightened self-interest, that invisible hand that Adam Smith gave us, one must always remember that capitalism is a means to an end. William F. Buckley said that the problem with socialism is socialism, but the problem with capitalism is capitalists. And so we need to create a system that not only protects against the invasions of the totalitarian state, the collectivist state, but we also need to make sure that we have a system of laws. And Ayn was very much against the libertarian in her lifetime. She felt that they were the combination of an anarchist and a capitalist, which she thought was actually worse than anything. But we need to make sure that we have a system of laws that protect private property, but also protect, as Röpke would say, that humane scale of human economics that really allow, again, capitalism is really a means to an end that allow for us to really take care of our families and our communities.
We're talking on the American Dream Show with Jay McNally. I'm talking to Darrin Moore about the movie Atlas Shrugged, which just came out last night, and I was watching it with a big pile of popcorn and cherry Coke at the rave. There are only 7 people watching it, so I don't think this film is going to last very long at the theaters. What do you think, Darrin?
Well, I didn't see it. I stayed home last night and watched another movie that folks that like Shrugged ought to watch, which is called The Passion of Ayn Rand, which actually goes into those polygamous relationships that you mentioned earlier, how her personal life became very destructive because she did have, folks like Rand, they have taken out God, their faith in God, and instead have put total faith in reason. This is the same mistake that the scientific positivists make. They think that logic is the way to answer all of our questions, and she doesn't seem to grasp the concept that Hume gave us, that the rules of morality are not conclusions of our reason. That all through time, written on almost every page of history, is evidence that passion of man corrupts his reason. I mean, think about it. Jay, would you trust the reason of your 20-year-old version of yourself to make all decisions? Or have we all...
As I get older, I realize that everybody needs to have a grandpa or a grandma to give them advice. Now, we've got call-in. Judy from Celine has called in. Judy, are you on?
Yeah. Yes,
Judy,
I'm here.
How are you doing? Thanks for calling in.
Oh, sure. I love your discussion this morning. And I just wanted to mention, with regard to capitalism, so many people confuse that with greed. And it's easy, I guess, to do that. But, there's a great little book called The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism by Max Weber. And he makes the point that capitalism is at its heart it's about production. And to be a capitalist, to support the means of production, means that you have to plan for the future. You have to be frugal. You have to set capital aside in order to continue the growth of whatever your enterprise is. It is inherently kind of thrifty or philosophy.
You got to be looking at the future. Well,
Exactly.
we're coming up to the end of this fascinating discussion.